2025 was an incredible year for video games, and it would not be difficult to fill this list with games exclusively released last year. But I haven't really had the luxury to buy whatever games I wanted until somewhat recently, so while I did play some of the biggest hits of 2025, I really spent most of my time with the biggest hits of the past 8 or so years. This video won't go too deep into every game, so if you're curious about my full thoughts on every game on this list, then you should check out my blog. It holds all the reviews I've written for games over the past 1 or 2 years. As you scroll through my blog or this video, just keep note that given the number of great games I've played, many of them won't rank high on this list, or not at all. Trust me, this list was hard to make, but without further ado, let's start with the honorable mention. To put one of the best written games of all time in honorable mentions feels crazy. I don't think this game needs an introduction. Any conversation on what's the best narrative in games can't escape the black hole that is Disco Elysium. It's strange to say that this is one of the best written games I've ever played, even though I don't think I can fully explain why it is so good, but I'm still gonna try. As you recover from your hangover and start talking to the citizens of Revachol, you will be bombarded with a slew of different names of factions, people, and places. You may hear murmurs of some war, some group that was wronged by another, but the lack of knowledge about this city's history makes separating fact from fiction nigh impossible. After all, you were just put into this world a few hours ago. Perhaps what I find most interesting about this game is how this information overload works in its favor. It may be overwhelming at times, some NPCs yap a lot, but every exposition dump left me wondering what's really going on in that person's life. It doesn't take many interactions to realize that there is a scar inflicted upon the city and its people that can be felt so palpably even if you don't know what caused it. I'm not sure another game has really given me the feeling of Sonder, that the NPCs are all as complex as the characters we control, emotional creatures that may not always do the right thing or logical thing, but people who are ultimately the products of their environment. What makes a person is a confluence of events that no individual can fully comprehend, which is why the sheer density of writing packed into Disco Elysium makes its characters feel so real. There is too much history that's taken place for you to understand. You hear about events that have occurred, events that have impacted people, but you don't know the why or the how. And the knowledge of events that have shaped the citizens of Revachol is what really gives me that feeling of Sonder. That's what makes Disco Elysium so special to me. Many games with good narratives are typically character driven, focusing on its main protagonists, but rarely do they excel in world building. Disco Elysium does have a great protagonist in Kim Kitsuragi, and look, I love him as much as everyone else does, but every side character still plays an important role in contributing to world building. What better way to make the world feel real than to make the characters in it feel real first? So why didn't this make it on my top 10? Because that certainly was a lot of praise. Well, I just don't really like reading that much. Yes, I was playing on the final card where everything is voice acted, but it's still an insane amount of text. And I don't really care much for the political commentary. If anything, it's a testament to the game's quality that I hold it to such high regard despite my impatience with text walls. Simply put, Disco Elysium is a game that I respect more than I enjoy, and this is a distinction that greatly affects the placements of games on this list. Not every video game has to elevate the medium in some grand revolutionary way. It's fine for games to just be fun, but the games that do use their strengths of the medium in a way that no other medium can are undoubtedly some of the most memorable experiences, not in least part due to how difficult and rare it is to do so, which is why SOMA makes it on this list. If you didn't know, I've already made a video on this game about why I think it has the best use of interactivity I've experienced in any game. In short, there is an easy misconception that you can make early on which will completely change how you experience this game. After suffering brain damage from a car accident, Simon Jarrett agrees to an experimental brain scan which copies his consciousness instead of transferring it. This distinction greatly changes the philosophical implication of certain scenes, and Simon likewise responds accordingly. But maybe the idea of facing a clone of yourself is just too threatening to his sense of self that he blocks it out of his mind, just as I did when I was playing the game. The decision to switch perspectives all the way until the end, the maintained control scheme across different copies, and the abstraction of physical differences really made me feel like I was playing the one lone Simon. Simon is so distraught by the implication of clones that Catherine has to lie to him to soothe him. The lie of a coin flip, a 50-50 chance of ending up in the correct Simon. This misconception lasted all the way to the end for me, and to be honest, I still didn't fully grasp what had happened then either. It took days after finishing the game before I realized what I had got wrong, that I fully understood the implications of the copy consciousness. This revelation recontextualized so much of the game for me that I completely rewrote my review. In what felt like an instant, my opinion on this game completely changed. Yeah, sure, opinions change over time. There's a lot of games, even the ones on this list, whom my opinion of got better over time, but none of those changes were as stuck as the change for SOMA. That experience, that epiphany, that feeling that I had solved some great mystery for myself is what makes it land on this list. It is tough to put it very high, however. As amazing as the interactivity and narrative are, there is also the gameplay, which is not offensively bad, but it ain't great either. There's a reason why no one talks about the gameplay and everyone just glazes only the story. I am very excited to see what Frictional Games has in store for us this year with Ontos. Who knows, that might make it on next year's list if I decide to make another one of these. We finally reached the first 2025 release to make it onto this list, and that is Blue Prince. This game has quite a reputation. Even if you haven't played it for yourself, you may have heard of its puzzle roguelike elements. You may have also heard how this game hides puzzles and clues in plain sight. I was aware of this before I started, and on my first run I was already scrutinizing every detail in every room, taking note of whatever oddity. Like all these clocks in the den. Why are there so many of them, and why do some of them have markings? Well, it's actually nothing. It is just a room with many clocks in it for some reason, but that's also kind of the fun of it. You take down so many notes, take so many screenshots because you don't know what is and isn't relevant, which makes the payoffs that much more rewarding. Revisiting my notes almost a year on is such a wild trip, and I especially love seeing all the batshit insane details I was taking note of because, in retrospect, most of these are complete nonsense. It's truly exciting to see one out of the 5 other useless things you wrote down finally have some payoff. But what exactly are these payoffs? Typically, the joy of solving a puzzle is intrinsic to the process. Solving the puzzle is itself the reward, the satisfaction you get from it. And Blue Prince does have some of these, but they tend not to be particularly deep because most puzzles are really just knowledge checks. Instead, much of the rewards help you to reach the end goal of reaching room 46, be it through direct upgrades or knowledge that makes future runs easier. They can apply to one specific room or the relationship between multiple rooms, or sometimes the game brings you somewhere outside the house. Maybe the most surprising part of this game is how well it succeeds in exploration. Blue Prince genuinely had moments that made me go holy shit in the same way that games like Elden Ring had me go when I was discovering new areas. The highlight for me was the first time I went underground through the tomb. I was just shocked by how big that whole area was, by how far it kept going, and by how much more the game was teasing. Tens of hours later, I would return to the reservoir with the water level now perfect for me to enter this hole. The ride is slow, it's serene. And as you emerge from that hole, you see another opening, one that captures your attention fully. And when you enter, you notice the beds, the chairs, tables, cups, the refrigerator. You find the map to a museum with annotations. You realize this is a safe house, the one that housed your mother for months before her grand heist. There is more to this room, like this nice looking key and more obscure clues you find. Arguably, those are the most important things you find, but whatever progress those items represented didn't matter to me, not as much as discovering the area itself. There are more moments like this where you discover areas outside the house, but it feels like no one talks about this aspect of the game that much. Much of the focus is on the genius design, how the roguelike elements work with the puzzles. Maybe it's just cause I love exploration so much, and the exploration in this game was truly magical and exciting. This isn't something I expect from puzzle games or roguelikes, but I'm more than happy that Blue Prince surprised me. I've always been a solo gamer, and It Takes Two is genuinely one of the few times in my life playing a game with someone else. Naturally, there is a novelty and excitement to this experience that no other game in 2025 had for me. What's better than gaming? Well, doing it with your friends, my two favorite things all in one. As much as I loved it, I honestly have forgotten much of the specifics. This game just exists as a hazy cloud of unadulterated fun that lives in my memory. And it's the time that I've spent away from this game that makes one thing very clear. That the fun I had isn't just tied to the co-op experience or how much I liked the guy I was playing it with. It's because this game freaking rules. Let's tangent to another great game, Celeste, which to me is the pinnacle of game design in terms of how it fully fleshes out its ideas. The gimmicks it introduces are really simple and intuitive. Instead of bloating the game with too many ideas, Celeste makes sure to never forget any of the gimmicks it introduces no matter how early you see them. The game constantly mixes and matches gimmicks from different chapters. The way they interact and flow into one another is different. Each new gimmick introduced thereby makes every gimmick before that more complex, allowing levels to be engaging the whole way through simply by using different combinations of the same gimmicks you've encountered. It Takes Two doesn't do any of this. In fact, it kind of does the opposite. On paper, a game that jumps between 9 different gimmicks an hour at a time with random genre bands thrown into the mix sounds like a mess. How could you possibly develop these ideas into something worthwhile? Yet It Takes Two triumphs among all these challenges to create one of the most captivating gaming experiences of my life. This game jumps from gimmick to gimmick to gimmick, all of which feel like they could be the basis for an entire game. They feel like they could last hours longer, but this game doesn't care because it's so confident in its ability to recapture your attention with another incredible gimmick just as you leave one behind. And this confidence isn't unearned because every new gimmick had its hooks in me right from the get-go. It helps that despite the short 1 or 2 hour lifespan, these gimmicks feel more fleshed out than most games achieve in their full runtime. They're just so goddamn fun, they're intuitive and they incentivize cooperation, which seems pretty important for a co-op game. And have I mentioned how imaginative this whole game is with its environments, how the bosses and gimmicks fit naturally into the places they are set in, and how truly beautiful some of these set pieces are. This game used to be lower on my list, but the creation of this video took so long that I have now finished Split Fiction since starting this, and as much as I enjoyed that game, I'm not sure if it hit as hard as It Takes Two. I think it actually made me appreciate It Takes Two more, which is why I raised it up on this list, and honestly I'm not even sure that Split Fiction is going to make it to next year's list, but we'll see. The Last of Us Part 2 is the most polarizing game on this list. I'm not referring to the general consensus, I'm talking about the game itself, because the highs and lows of this game are so drastic. I'm not sure how to properly rank this game. On one hand, the game is poorly paced, the gameplay changes are welcome but do not justify the extra 10 hours of playtime, stupid plot contrivances, weird sex scenes, unbelievable character motivations. But on the other hand, The Last of Us Part 2 may have the best cutscenes I have ever seen in a video game. The star of the show is yet again Joel and Ellie, and it's not just one scene that's amazing, it's like all of them. The first of which happens in Ellie's room. After Joel gets her attention, you quickly notice there's something off. The tremble in Joel's voice, the dryness in Ellie's replies, the physical space that separates them. There is a coldness that lingers in the room. This introduction surprised me, considering what Joel and Ellie went through in the first game. It feels like their relationship should be unbreakable, and it still kind of is. After his death, we see Ellie in deep mourning, then we see an excursion that Joel brings her on. But as beautiful as these scenes are, the unshakable coldness between them still lingers. Maybe it's because I already know why. I know what Joel can't take back. I know what he's lied to her about. Every detail in these scenes, the dialogue, the delivery, the body language, all of it conveys the complex relationship between them. Every word unsaid means just as much as the words that are spoken. You know what caused the rift between them before it's revealed. You know Ellie doesn't truly believe Joel before the hospital scene. You know that Ellie still loves Joel, even if she never said it herself. Loving someone who hurt you is an unsolvable paradox. How do you reconcile that love and hate on a personal level, let alone portray that in another character? It's too easy to imagine how this ambition could have gone wrong, how it could have come off as confused, conflicted, but somehow The Last of Us Part 2 manages to pull it off. While these cutscenes are truly incredible, they also made the rest of the game feel less good. It was probably necessary to kill Joel to create space in the narrative, but his absence is ever more deafening when the rest of the cast doesn't exactly have much to offer compared to the relationship between Joel and Ellie. If somehow the rest of the cutscenes were as good as the Joel-Ellie scenes, then this would be like my favorite narrative game of all time, but instead it sits at 7 on this list. I can't speak on the influence that Resident Evil 4 had on action games because I was born the same year it was released. Its influence is lost on me, but if anything, it speaks to that influence that what it pioneered feels so fundamental that imagining a world without it just doesn't make any sense. I may not be able to appreciate how truly impactful the OG is, but I can certainly appreciate how goddamn fun the remake is. Resident Evil 4 is just one of those perfectly designed games like It Takes Two and Blue Prince where I was just addicted the whole way through. I land a headshot, kick him in the face, repeat for 18 hours, and somehow I'm not even bored, not even for a second. This game does so many things right in terms of keeping the player engaged with the progression, new set pieces, one-off gimmick fights and environments. The pacing is just perfect. Combat also feels impactful. Aside from the endlessly satisfying roundhouse kicks, I love how the enemies react to your gunshots, how they clutch whatever area you shoot them in instead of continuing to walk towards you like a lifeless meatbag. Saying I shot hits and kicked ass for 18 hours is simplifying things a bit. The game has to make sure that you aren't literally doing the same thing on repeat for hours, and that's where the enemy variety comes in. Much of the difference between enemies are quite apparent, as in you see what the game is throwing at you and you understand what it's asking from you. If a guy is wearing a helmet, well, maybe the headshots aren't so effective in that case. The different enemies demand different play patterns from you so that you don't always rely on the same tricks. But the best moments were when the nuances of an enemy weren't so immediately obvious. Take these zealots for example. I mean, they look pretty normal, like any other cloak-wearing cultist that you would find in media. Innocuous it seems until you actually start facing them. While I did rely on my trusty headshots, I sometimes went to shooting the leg, equally effective in destabilizing the enemy for a kick. It wasn't until a horde of them closed in on me where I aimed my camera down for a leg shot and realized, where the hell are their legs? I did not consider this to be an issue at all until that point. I mean, they look like normal enemies. I thought it was just more filler for me to kick, but this incredibly generic looking cultist design actually matters, actually has significance to gameplay. I love it when games hide their design choices right in front of you and let you discover it on your own. The design choice itself becomes a payoff. Bottom line is that this game is great and single-handedly got me interested in this series. I have yet to play another Resident Evil game, but who knows, maybe another game in this series will make it on next year's list. Not even more than one section of the video and we're back to talking about The Last of Us again. Part 1 honestly felt like a very safe game. The zombie apocalypse setting, a parent-child relationship that is thrust upon the main character, and the simple Resident Evil 4 inspired gunplay. I played this before Resident Evil 4, so this actually was my first exposure to this type of gunplay. I didn't know what to expect in terms of gameplay. I always thought of this game as primarily narrative focused, and it is, but I also didn't expect to love the gameplay so much. Because of that, this game felt almost perfect to me, especially in how it divides the story and gameplay sections. There was only a singular gameplay section that I felt lasted slightly too long, otherwise the pacing was on point. But if that was it, I don't think I would have loved the game, and that was what I felt as I was approaching the end. Well, that was what I felt until I reached the end. This game is quite uneventful. You meet new faces, friendly and hostile, but it's mostly just two people traveling across America. How exciting of an ending could you make? And the answer to that question is that you can make one of the best endings in any video game ever. This game's ending is a masterclass in creating suspense. After the literal one-man versus an army break-in, Joel carries Ellie out of the hospital. But as he's about to leave, Marlene is there to give him one last chance to sacrifice Ellie. Then you cut to Joel's car and for a split second, you don't know what choice he made. That is until you see the back of the car. Then he just so shockingly, flagrantly lies to her as you cut between his car and Marlene in the car park. After the escape, you think everything is over, that this epilogue is one final slice of life moment to show how they live happily ever after, but it's not.
You keep finding something to fight for. Now, I know that's not what you want to hear right now.
Swear to me. Swear to me that everything that you've said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Okay.
I value peak experiences in games. Experiencing something that almost no other game can give makes it stand out. It can make a deeply flawed game still memorable, or it can make an already good game great. And it's hard to think of another game whose ending did so much for me in terms of improving my opinion on it, especially when it was already so positive. Reaching the upper half of this list is obviously a big deal, but for me, the real difference in this list is between the 4th and 5th spot. This is the dividing line between games that are incredible and games that I consider to be my favorites of all time. That is to say that the top 4 are in a completely different league of their own. Before I could buy whatever games I wanted, much of my gaming experience was through watching Let's Plays, especially so for narrative games which were an obvious target given the lessened focus on gameplay. Many of my favorites like What Remains of Edith Finch, The Beginner's Guide, Before Your Eyes were all experienced through another player. I always wondered what it would be like to have experienced all these great games myself, which makes this next entry feel all the more like a miracle. A miracle that the first narrative game I played for myself is now my favorite. In my section for Disco Elysium, I said that narrative games tend to be character driven. Rarely do they excel in world building like Disco Elysium, and rarely do they excel in plot like 1000 Times Resist. The story of this game is told through many different eras of time, and there is initially no context to where and when you are situated, what happened before, and what will happen after. Quickly you find out that humanity was felled by an alien invasion that induced a pandemic which makes people cry to death. That's a crazy setup, but as ridiculous as it is, there is so much more to this game. One of the main themes is generational trauma. Naturally, the game takes you through multiple generations to show you the evolution of traditions, which traditions are remnants of the past, and which will be lost to time. I can't imagine juggling multiple epochs at a time to be simple, yet somehow this game is able to present all this information in a digestible manner, all while leaving mysteries to entice you and hints that foreshadow future reveals. The way this game tells its story non-linearly is masterful in this respect, and is always done so to remind you how history rhymes and how these traumas resist the test of time. But through all these different eras of political drama and cataclysm is something more powerful. As you weave between the different eras of time, feel the weight of oppression, navigate the impossibly difficult complexities of revolution, you find the people. Yes, I said 1000 times resist excels in plot, but the game also never gets so crowded in its narrative that it doesn't have space for those interpersonal moments. Moments that hit like a truck, far harder and far more impactful than anything else to create a narrative that is as heartfelt as it is thought-provoking. It's always these character moments that feel oddly real, an injection of humanity into an otherwise impossible scenario. How else could you connect to a game like this? Not everyone will face the struggle of immigrating to a new country, or the stranglehold of an oppressive government, or the end of the world. I certainly haven't, yet I feel more connected to this story than almost any other game. There are multiple scenes that have stuck with me so vividly, each one of them worthy as an emotional climax of a lesser but still good story. Look, I could sit here and gush over this game for a long time. I remember the first time playing it, there were multiple occasions I paused the game and stood up from where I was sitting because I was just so impressed with what I was seeing that I had to give myself a moment to fully take it in. That doesn't really happen for many games for me. I don't think it has to be said, but any game on this list is one that I would recommend, but this is the game that I truly wish I could have the most people try out. It's by far the least well-known entry on this list, but one of the most memorable and best stories I have ever had the joy of experiencing. Please play this game if you haven't already. I used to almost exclusively play indie games because they tend to be less intensive, but after getting a new laptop, I was finally able to try many of the most critically acclaimed and beloved AAA games that have dominated the landscape in recent times. In 2024, that game was Elden Ring, and in 2025, that game was Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is a CRPG based on Dungeons & Dragons, two gigantic rabbit holes that I have absolutely no experience with up until this point. Getting into this game was really difficult. It may be the most guide-heavy playthrough I've ever done. It took many hours, but after getting through the initial hurdle, this game sucked me in. Part of the reason it took so long for me to get invested is because Baldur's Gate 3's most impressive quality is hidden from you for many hours, because after my 120-hour first playthrough, I still feel like I haven't even seen half of it. The reason for this scale only makes sense once you look at the source material. Dungeons & Dragons is a game of infinite possibilities, the grandfather of role-playing games. While there may be planned events and scenarios, much of the charm seems to be the improv between player and dungeon master, creating immersive gameplay that keeps all parties interested and engaged. Now, how exactly do you do that in a video game? How do you replicate the boundless imagination of a human mind? Well, you probably can't, so instead, Larian Studios decided that the best it could do is to create such an incomprehensible scale of content so that it feels like the game has thought of every possible scenario. Have you ever visited a landmark or participated in some event that you've seen pictures of and videos dozens of times only to realize how limited those pictures and videos are? There is a sense of scale that can't be captured on any device, only taken in when you are there, present in that moment, present in that place. This is how I feel about Baldur's Gate 3. There is no way for me to express how unique your own playthrough of this game will be unless you play it for yourself and realize how many micro decisions you're allowed to make and different paths you could have taken. This game has so many branching paths, different states that account for even the order of events that take place. It's stunning how often this game made me feel like it was fully acknowledging the specific approach and decisions I was making by having unique dialogue and events occur because of it. You are so frequently bound within the constraints and logistics of video game development that you don't expect multiple outcomes, but every decision I made in this game made me wonder what would happen if I had done this differently, in a way that few games do for me. I used to look at a game like Hitman and admire its environmental interaction. I used to look at a game like Detroit Become Human and marvel at those elaborate decision trees they show you at the end of every chapter. Those games stuck with me because I thought they excelled in something that almost no other game could at their level, and Baldur's Gate 3 somehow does both of these things at the same time. This may be the most impressive game I have ever played, which is why it is so high on my list, but also a recognition that if I had more prior experience, if I was able to engage with the turn-based combat on a deeper level, if I wasn't shackled by the outside help I felt I required, then this game could have literally been my favorite game of all time. Before this gaming escapade that started with me acquiring a new laptop, I probably would have said that Hollow Knight was my favorite game of all time. Like for many others I'm sure, Hollow Knight was my gateway drug into the Metroidvania genre, which has become my go-to genre of sorts for many years. I didn't even play it blind, so the size of the world and the bosses were no shock to me. I still loved my initial playthrough, but it was only years later that I realized my appreciation for the game was very limited. Since playing Hollow Knight, I have completed over 30 Metroidvanias, and it's only after fully immersing myself in this genre that I realized how truly special this game was. Every area has multiple entrances and exits that can be accessed with different combinations of abilities that create a true sense of exploration. While the game has an intended path, anecdotally, it feels like everyone's playthrough of Hollow Knight is a little bit different. I always wish I could play Hollow Knight for the first time again, except completely fresh, free from any knowledge I had from watching Let's Plays, so I could be fully immersed in its masterfully crafted world. Well, maybe I don't have to imagine no longer, because Hollow Knight Silksong finally released in 2025. In what can only be described as the most intense gaming session I have ever had in my entire life of playing 10 hours a day, 5 days in a row, I'm not sure I'll ever experience another game like this, one that captivated me in such a deep way that it could drive me to play continuously for so long. That honestly might have been the best week of 2025 for me. It's rare that I'm giddy to play a game, and overwhelming excitement can set expectations too high, but even as I played what is my most anticipated game of all time, I was not disappointed at all. It's crazy to think that just a few years ago, Hollow Knight was my favorite game of all time when we now have Silksong, which feels better in so many ways. The gorgeous hand-drawn art style with the depth of the parallax backgrounds, the NPC interactions that are enhanced by Honor's voice, the truly stellar boss roster, the healing system that makes boss fights exhilarating as your health bar frantically oscillates between double mask hits and triple mask heals. How do you take such a beloved game in Hollow Knight and not just improve on it, but make the sequel feel like that's how it always should have been? There is something more than just the game itself. I rarely take part in hype releases. I remember in 2022, all I could see was Elden Ring and this boss called Melania, whatever that is. At the time, I couldn't take part in any of these conversations, and by the time I played it for myself, well, the hype was long over. But for Silksong, I was a part of that zeitgeist alongside other people, online and in real life, experiencing this game for the first time together. Falling in love with SOMA, raging at the double damage environmental hazards, advocating for the Reaper or Wanderer quest, navigating the horrors of Baldur, battling through the gauntlet in the high halls. Silksong is maybe the most fun I have ever had with a game and the best gaming experience of my life. And I don't think I'll have this experience not for a very long time. So where does that leave us? What could be better than that? Well, I'm not really sure. It feels ridiculous, almost contradictory to call something the best gaming experience of my life and not have it at number 1. Yet there is no other spot I could imagine this next game placing at. Maybe it's just because I already had such high expectations, such high confidence in Team Cherry that I knew Silksong was going to be one of my favorite games of all time even before I played it. That certainly can't be said about the next game. It feels unusual that with how many games I played last year that somehow the top 2 games are both from 2025. I won't drag this any longer because it's not like this is some sort of mystery. I really don't mean to sound too overindulgent, too melodramatic for a top 10 games list, but booting up Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is truly one of the most magical experiences of my life. The only words I can think of that truly encapsulate this experience is love at first sight. There is nothing I can say that could fully convey how I felt, no one thing I could point to explain why I feel this way. Is it because of that crisp logo, the petals that fly, or the haunting track that plays? There's almost nothing for me to latch onto, but somehow I knew that I was about to experience something special. It wasn't just the title screen, because once you start the game, you are thrown right into Lumiere. The following hours were, with no exaggeration, the best opening hours I've ever played in a video game, head and shoulders above anything else. This game wastes no time to dazzle you with its beautiful cutscenes, music, and performances. I can't explain to you how unbelievably impressed I was to not just be starstruck once, but over and over again during this whole opening. From the amazing voice and mocap performances with some of the most naturalistic dialogue I've ever seen, to the central hook of the game that somehow gripped me more than the parry-based combat, to the gomage itself. At some point I thought to myself, if this game was just a demo that only included a prologue, it would still be one of my favorite narrative experiences ever. The quality of writing here is outstanding. Not only is the hook effective, but the game explores its implications deeply. It's not just some plot device to give a reason why there are expeditions, but rather it is something that the people of Lumiere react to, warp their lives around. With time literally ticking down, how does this change how you see the world, how you see death? The Gomage is a mass extinction event, yet it is celebrated. What duty do you have to society? Does serving your people mean that in the last year of your life you set out on an expedition to stop this perpetual death? Or does it mean you stay at home to give your last moments to those that love you? Or what about having children? Is it responsible to bring life to a world when it's guaranteed to be cut short? Or is life so beautiful that even a short life can still have meaning? One of the common complaints I hear is about how the story takes a hard pivot in its final act. I understand. Admittedly, I'm not sure if the game's writing exceeds what is presented initially, but I still loved it. I guess I'm just a sucker for that interpersonal drama. I talked about this in my section on 1000 Times Resist, but what I appreciate the most in stories are those human moments. And those moments hit harder for me when what is initially presented feels so out there, yet it is able to be brought down to earth into something much more relatable, which is what I think Act 3 does. Maybe the bigger complaint, however, is about the balancing. It's very obvious when playing the Act 3 side content that much of it really feels like it shouldn't be side content. It is so important, and if you do any sort of exploration before reaching the final boss, you are almost guaranteed a free win, if not just one-shotting it. Here's the thing, I love that. Throughout the game, I was already exploring every place I could, entering areas despite their level warnings. There was just something really fun about the game letting me be stubborn. But the part I loved the most is that the game rewarded me for that, be it through levels or some overpowered pictos. One-shotting every encounter in the main story felt fun. It felt like the game recognized my efforts and just said, screw it, we'll just let you one-shot everything now. I felt like I earned it. How many games let you do this? If you ever fight a boss under level, it's almost always just a self-imposed challenge, and I do like that challenge, but I didn't realize how fun it would be if those ridiculous self-imposed challenges were rewarded accordingly by the game. I loved the balancing for this reason. Even the things that people criticize this game for are things that I actually liked, things that worked for me. I haven't even talked about the gameplay. Can we talk about how incredible and satisfying the parries and counter attacks are? The weight of combat in Expedition 33 far exceeds that of most action games. The parrying is what drove my interest initially, and I continued to love it, but it was the story, the presentation, the performances, the visuals, and especially the music that made the game so memorable to me. The OST is easily my favorite video game soundtrack ever. It's the soundtrack that I've listened to the most outside of the game. Maybe the greatest compliment I can give to this game is that this game has a parry in it and it's not even my favorite part. So that's the end. Wow, that is long for a top 10 list, and it was somehow even longer before. This took way more work than I was expecting, and I would not have guessed that this would be longer than my Silksong video. I even re-recorded this script because the first iteration of it was so terrible. If you have made it this far, thank you. If you enjoyed this style of video and want to see more, you can check out my individual videos on SOMA and Hollow Knight Silksong. Or you can check out my blog to see the reviews I wrote for every single one of these games when I first beat them initially. And if you want to support me, just like and share this video and subscribe and notifications and all that stuff. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope the next video I make isn't this monumental. So I hope I can see you guys soon. And not in a really long time. Bye!